أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة ابن الحسن العسكري فداء أرواح العالمين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. As a gift and a small token to the one to whom this night belongs, Ameerul Momineen wa Sayyidul Wasiyyin wa Imam al-Muttaqeen wa Ya'qubuddin Asadillah al-Ghalib Ali ibn Abi Talib, recite aloud salawat ala
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum wa Allahumma ajma'in.
For our sins to be forgiven, for our a'mal to be accepted, for when we call out al-afu al-afu, for these calls to rise to the heavens along with the al-afu al-afu by the Imam of our time, for the hastening of his reappearance, recite another loud salawat ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum wa Allahumma ajma'in.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ameerul Momineen yearns for his brothers. We mentioned some of them that he specifically cited in his very last sermon, only a few days before he was assassinated and martyred at the hands of the wicked Ibn Muljam al-Muradi. The narrator of the sermon, in fact, says that the week did not end except that we saw Ameerul Momineen lying on the ground of Masjid al-Kufa. Those were very turbulent times, very difficult phase in the life of Ameerul Momineen. News was coming left, right and center that cities were falling and that Muawiyah's armies were marching. Muawiyah was known as someone who would not keep his word. He broke every single one of his promises to Ameerul Momineen, and he continued his conquest. And every time they brought news to Ameerul Momineen that a new city or town had fallen, the Imam's heart would bleed. We know that Ameerul Momineen would receive news that Busr ibn Artat, for instance, had ambushed the town, and he had threatened the Christian or Jewish women of the town. And the Imam would immediately ascend the pulpit, deliver a sermon, and say that if someone heard of this and died of agony and grief, فَمَا كَانَ عَنْدِي مَلُومًا, I wouldn't blame him. Because a Christian or a Jewish woman had been intimidated or threatened, or they had some of their jewelry taken from them. So imagine every time Ameerul Momineen heard that Muslims were being violated, that his Shia were being hunted down, what that did to the blessed heart of Ameerul Momineen, only Allah knows. And so the Imam longed for the people who had given their pledge of allegiance to him truthfully. The ones that he mentions had vowed to die for him. He says, where are those people? أين Ammar? أين ابن التيهان? أين ذو الشهادتين? Where are the ones who stood up and spoke the truth at the cost of their so-called worldly reputation? Sometimes we hear the sanctity of the Imams ﷺ is violated, they are desecrated, they are disrespected, but we choose not to speak out in order to maintain what we think of as civility. Because our reputation to us matters more than the reputation of Rasulullah, the reputation of the Ahlul Bayt, the reputation of Imam al-Zaman. That even though there are liars and imposters and charlatans trying to take away the most precious thing that we have, which is our allegiance and love to the Ahlul Bayt, take away the only source of wealth that you and I have, brothers and sisters. Didn't Abu Dharr al-Ghifaari, salamullahi alayhi, isn't that what he said to the messenger of Uthman? When Uthman sent his slave offering him some money, first he interrogated the slave. You've all heard the story. He said, where did this come from? He said, the Khalifa sent it to you. He said, which Khalifa? As far as I know, Uthman had no money prior to becoming Khalifa. Is this his personal money, or did he take it from the Muslim treasury? If it's his personal money, where did he take it from? How did it come into his possession? He needs to be audited. And if it's from the Muslim treasury, am I the only one receiving it, or is this something that's being distributed equally among every single citizen, every Muslim? So the slave said to him, listen, just take the money. I just took a peek inside your home. You're a poor man. You need this money. We all know that. Your family's starving. Your children have no food on the table. It's a statement made by the slave, but it was the biggest insult to Abu Dharr. He said, Ana faqir? You're calling me a poor man? Ana ghaniyun biwilayati Ali ibn Abi I have the most valuable thing in this entire universe. You're calling me poor? I'm the richest person there is. Someone came to our sixth Imam and he complained about his financial situation. He said to the Imam that, I need help, I'm poor. The Imam said to him, but you're not poor though, are you? He said, look at me, why would I be asking you if I wasn't poor? The Imam said to him, you have something. What would you say if you were offered the entire world and the 7 heavens above and everything beneath them in exchange for your love to us? Would you give that up? He said, no. The Imam said to him, then you're the richest person. How could you say you're poor? And so when this love is under attack, when someone comes along and tries to take it away from you, tries to take away your faith and your belief and your creed, that's not the time to be thinking about my reputation. That's the time for you to stand up and speak the truth. That's all most of us need to do. Speak the truth, that's it. The Imam yearns for people like that. They say that, speaking of Zaid Ibn Sauhaan, whose name we mentioned in the last majlis, when Aisha went to Basra, she wrote to him. He was a very notable personality. He was very important in his tribe. And so she sends him a letter in which she says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, min al-Momineen, زوج رسول الله, عائشة بنت أبي بكر بن أبي قحافة, إلى ولدها الصالح زيد بن Sauhaan. So she praises him. She tries to portray him as someone who's close to her heart. And we all know how these games go, right? She said to him, from the mother of the believers to her righteous son, Zayd, I wish for you to come and join me in my conquest, in my battle, to avenge the blood of the oppressed Khalifa Uthman ibn Affan. What do you say? Zayd wrote back to her. Listen to this. He said to her, you have been commanded by Allah to do one thing, and we have been commanded by Allah to do something. Your obligation is to stay in your home as instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. You have abandoned your own obligation, and you've come to us to try and stop us from fulfilling our obligation, which is what? Allah has commanded us to stand by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Holy Prophet said, عَلِيٌّ مَعَ الْحَقِّ وَالْحَقُّ مَعَ عَلِيٍّ يَدُورُ مَعَهُ حَيْثُ مَا دَارَ يَا عَلِي أَنْتَ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْكَ أقاتل على التنزيل وأقاتل على التأويل تقاتل الناكثين والقاسطين والمارقين. The Holy Prophet commanded you to stay in your home, and he commanded us to fight alongside Ameerul Momineen against his enemy. Not only have you failed to fulfill your own obligation, you want us to not fulfill ours. She said to him, does that mean that people will fight me? He said, I will be the first to fight you. Ameerul Momineen yearned for people like this. I'll mention another example. Ammar ibn Yasir, when Aisha announced that she was going to lead the armies into battle, on the back of her camel, Ameerul Momineen sent his son Imam al-Hasan and Ammar to Kufa. Remember, he was in Medina. Aisha went to Mecca, and in Mecca she announced, once she realized who had been sworn in, who had been given the Pledge of Allegiance, she thought it was going to be Zubayr or Talha. Once she realized it was Ali ibn Abi Talib, suddenly she raised the flag of the oppression of Uthman and his shirt and said that we now have to find his killers. So Ameerul Momineen sent his son and Ammar to Kufa. When they went to Kufa, they went to Masjid al-Kufa. Who was the governor? It was Abu Moosa Ash'ari. You know some of the things that he did, the role that he played, the very destructive actions that he took. He was the governor. So Imam al-Hasan got up and he spoke, he addressed the people. Then Ammar spoke and addressed the people. Then Abu Moosa Ash'ari stood on the pulpit and he said, Ayyuhan nas, I have heard from Rasulullah that if a fitna emerges, if there is discord or confusion, then you should stay in your homes. And my suggestion to you is to stay in your homes and not do anything. Ammar got up. He said to him, did the Prophet really tell you this? He said, by Allah, the Prophet told me this. He said to him, in that case, why don't you go and stay in your home instead of telling the people that they shouldn't side with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Just be quiet. Shut up and be quiet. Go and sit in your home. If that's what the Prophet really told you. As for me, فَإِنِّي أَشْهَدُ أَنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ قَدْ قَالَ لِي. The Prophet told me, and he told other Muslims, that Ali ibn Abi Talib would be challenged by the nakithin, those who break their pledge of allegiance. The first people to give their pledge to Ameerul Momineen were Talha and Zubayr. The Prophet told Ali ibn Abi Talib that they will fight him, and he told us all to stand by Ali and defend him and to fight his oppressors. That's what the Prophet told us. Go and sit in your home. Ameerul Momineen yearned for people like this. People like Maitham al-Tammaar. Imagine, Maytham was, number one, Persian. He was not an Arab. Number two, he was a slave, right? Some historians, they say that the origin story of Maitham was like this. Ameerul Momineen went to this person who sold slaves. He engaged in slave trade. He said to him, present your slaves to me. So he presented all the slaves. The Imam looked in their faces. He said, no, you have somebody else. So he said, yeah, I have a slave, but he's ill and doesn't really serve much of a purpose. The Imam said, bring him. He brought him out. It was Maitham. The Imam said, how much do you want for this slave? The slave trader realized that the Imam was seeking something. There was a reason, there was a purpose he wanted this slave and not the others, who were perhaps stronger and more muscular and more useful. So he upped the price. If a slave was sold for 100 dinars, for instance, he said, I want 200 for him. The Imam said to his companion, he said, pay him 200. The slave trader realized that he had something in his possession that was worth a lot. He said, no. The price is 300. The Imam said, pay him 300. Then he said, no, it's 500. The Imam said, pay him 500. He kept jacking up the price, and the Imam gave him whatever he asked for. Then he took him and left. The Imam said, had he continued to increase the price until the day of judgment, I would have paid him whatever he asked for. Because this is Maytham. This is someone who would become one of the confidants of Ameerul Momineen. Someone who never left the sight of Ameerul Momineen, which is why the Imam gave him secrets that he had not given anybody else. Ilmul manaya wal balaya. He told him when he would die, how he would die, the exact moment his soul would depart his body. He even told him about other people. Imagine someone knows when everyone's going to die and how they're going to die. How precious would this person be? And Ameerul Momineen, whenever he went into the market, subhanAllah, there were big shops and there were small shops, and the Imam would walk past each and every one of them and go all the way to this little table that was set on the ground with nothing but a small shade on top of it. And on the table there were some dates. And he would sit next to Maytham. And sometimes if Maytham had errands to make, things to do, he would have to go and, go about his daily business. The Imam would sit in his place and he would sell his dates. But the time Ameerul Momineen spent with Maytham was time in which he radiated upon the heart of this man with knowledge and wisdom. So much so that Maytham was often seen going to this palm tree which was dead. It didn't produce any fruit, any dates. The top of the palm tree had dried out and it was cut off. And yet Maytham would go and water this palm tree. They would say, why do you do this? This is the work of a madman. He would say, no, one day, me and this tree, we will have a moment together. Our picture will travel across the centuries. Me and this tree, we're supposed to be friends. Ibn Abbas one day came to Maitham al-Tammaar. Ibn Abbas, someone who's known now If you ask any Sunni Muslim who is the greatest exegete of the Quran, mufassir of the Quran, who will they say? Habrul Ummah, Ibn Abbas, Allah. Even though Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet passed away, he was just a child. Everything Ibn Abbas learnt was from none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib. But they gave him a prominent position. He wouldn't even mention, he wouldn't quote or cite Ameerul Momineen. The things he's learnt from the Imam, he would simply present them as his own knowledge. Anyway, we're not here trying to analyze Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, but it is truly sad and tragic that in the collective mind of the Muslim nation, the exegete of the Quran is not Ali ibn Abi Talib. Not the one the Prophet called al-Quran al-Natiq, but Ibn Abbas, who was one of the small students in the elementary classes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Ibn Abbas, even though people recognized him and they appreciated him and they elevated him, but he knew inside his heart, deep down, that he didn't have much. He says that all night long I traveled with Ali ibn Abi Talib and he spoke to me about none other than Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In fact, Ameerul Momineen is telling him that don't think you have much. Whatever you have is from us. Don't think you have much. In fact, I have not elucidated anything other than the dot underneath the ba of Bismillah to you. The Imam's trying to deliver a message to him. And so he knew whenever he came across one of the true erudite defenders of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the guardians of the truth, he knew that their status was above and beyond anything that he had. Maitham al-Tammaar once began to elaborate on a verse from the Quran. Immediately Ibn Abbas took a pen and paper and started to write. The only time you would pick up a pen and paper to write is when you know that you're receiving something valuable, something precious. If it's something you've heard elsewhere, you wouldn't really care. He started writing. So then Maitham al-Tammaar told him, by the way, I'm going to be crucified on that tree over there. Ibn Abbas threw the papers down and he started to shred them. He said, that means you're not a scholar. You're just a fortune teller. You're telling me that you're going to be crucified on that tree? What are you talking about? You're a fortune teller. You're nothing but a guru. Maytham said to him, just wait. Wait. Don't shred the papers. If you see me crucified on that tree, then keep what you've written. If I was not crucified on that tree and died in some other way, then you can take them and shred them whichever way you want. Just wait. This is Maitham al-Tammaar. One night, Maytham says that I saw Ameerul Momineen in the middle of the night. I said to him, Ya Ameerul Momineen, where are you going? He said, I want to go out of Kufa. He said, can I come with you? The Imam said, yes, you can. So he narrates the story in great detail. He says that we left and went to a masjid outside of Kufa. The Imam stood there, Salla 4 raka'at. He prayed 4 units. Then he recited this dua, then he recited that dua, then he did sajda like this, and he narrates the exact things that Ameerul Momineen said and did. When they finished, the Imam said to him, Ya Maytham, I want to go into the desert. Pitch black darkness. He said to me, Ya Ameerul Momineen, can I join you? He cared about the Imam. He knew the Imam had assassins and enemies and people who wanted him dead. So he says, I said to the Imam, would you give me permission to come with you? The Imam said yes. So we went to this very desolate, dark patch in the middle of the night desert. Then the Imam, with his index finger, drew a line in the sand and said to me, Ya Maytham, do not cross this line. I said to him, Na'am Sayyidi, whatever you say. The Imam then went. He went. Maytham says the Imam's absence took longer than I expected. Perhaps it was half an hour, an hour. After which I said to myself, Maytham says, Wayla nafsi, what are you doing? Your master, your imam, he's in danger. He's gone. You don't know if he's safe or not. What if something happens to him? Go and find out. So he was torn between obeying the imam's command or trying to protect him should he be in need of protection. So he says, I went after the imam, and that's when I saw Ameerul Momineen. He had stuck his body inside a well all the way down to his hips. وَكَانَ يُنَاجِي الْبِئْرَ وَيُنَاجِيهِ. The imam was speaking to the well, and what's even more mesmerizing is that the well was speaking back to him. As soon as I saw that, Ameerul Momineen knew that I was there. So he came out of the well, he looked at me and he said to him, Ya Maytham, Alam amuruk, didn't I command you not to cross that line? He said, Ya Ameerul Momineen, but I couldn't help it. I would have blamed myself if anything happened to you. I had to come. So the Imam said to him, Ya Maytham, did you hear what I said in the well? Any of the things that happened, any of the conversation? He said, No, Ya Ameerul Momineen, I didn't hear it. Then the Imam said to him, he said, Ya Maytham, my chest is under so much pressure. I feel this heaviness on my heart. There are things that I want to speak of, but I can't. And every time I feel this way, I come outside into the desert to speak inside a well. بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That you were so lonely, you had to come and vent your grievances to the well and the water in the well. Brothers and sisters, tonight is not a night for me to blabber and talk for too long. It's a night that's special for two extremely significant reasons. Number one, the descent of the Holy Quran, al-Quran al-Samit, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number three is the ascent of the speaking Quran, al-Quran al-Natiq Ali ibn Abi Talib. So this convergence of events makes this night absolutely critical and life-altering. It's life-altering because number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invited us to repent and to seek forgiveness and redemption. He's opened the gates to His mercy. And He's given us the chance to speak to Him and to beg and plead and ask Him to take yet another look at this sinful slave of His. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is so great that He's also made these two occurrences coincide so that we could use the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib to ask Allah for His forgiveness. And so, in other words, the way we speak to Allah is, Oh Allah, don't look at me. Look at the one that I love and follow. I ask you in His name. They say that once there was a person who committed a crime in the time of Rasulullah, and the Prophet said that this person should be killed. If you can arrest him and bring him to me, so be it. I will have him executed. The Prophet didn't kill people randomly or for no good reason. Imagine the crime he must have committed must have been grave. If he can be arrested, then we'll have him executed. If not, kill him wherever you find him. This man was absolutely desperate. What did he do? In the middle of the night, he went to the house of Ameerul Momineen. He said to him, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, I was friends with your father Abu Talib, and so I want you to intercede for me. I want you to speak to Rasulullah to forgive me, to absolve me of my crime. And so it was almost Fajr time. Ameerul Momineen took this man. He went into the masjid. As soon as he entered, the Prophet knew what was happening. Ali ibn Abi Talib holding this man's hand because he happened to love Abu Talib. Salamullahi alayhi. As soon as the Prophet saw that, he said, Ya Ali, ghafartu lahu li'ajlik. I have forgiven him for your sake. And so on a night like this, really, what do we do? What do we do? What recourse do we have? How can I, and with what excuse can I turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Even if I want to mention Ameerul Momineen, really, the famous prophetic hadith says, Aliyun mizanul a'mal. Ali is the scale by which our actions are weighed and evaluated. Ali, honestly, if the standard is Ameerul Momineen, then we might as well just pack up and abandon religion altogether. How can my actions be compared to Ameerul Momineen? How? What do we do? It's tough, brothers and sisters. Which is why it's so important that tonight when we attend these majalis and these gatherings where we find all of these mu'mineen, to supplicate together that we don't feel that we've achieved anything. What? I prayed to Allah for an hour or two or three, and now I think that my cup has been filled? That all my wishes have been granted? Because I prayed for a couple of years? A couple of hours? Throughout the year we do nothing. I'm speaking about myself. All of a sudden tonight I allocate a few hours in the company of these mu'mineen, and I think that I've achieved something? Notice one thing about Dua Joshan. You mention 1,001 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Beautiful names that honor and glorify the creator of the universe. And yet, after every 10 verses in that dua, what do you say? Subhanaka ya la ilaha illa ant. Al-Ghawth, Al-Ghawth, khallasna min al-nar ya Rab. What does Subhanak mean? Subhanak means, oh Allah, you're exalted from this. Exalted from what? Did I, God forbid, insult Allah? Did I say something that was inappropriate or wrong? So why do we keep saying Subhanak? Where in the Quran do we say Subhanak? قَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا. Allah says, the Christians say that Allah has a son. Subhanah! Allah is exalted from this. When somebody says something that is insulting or derogatory or somehow brings down the station and rank of the creator of the universe, that's when we say Subhanah. So why is it that when we say Ya Ahsan al-Raziqeen, Ya Khayr al-Ghafirin, all these beautiful honorific titles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we read in Dua Joshan, why do we have to say Subhanak afterwards? The reason is this. Imagine, I'll give you an example to illustrate. Imagine if a child, a schoolboy, was trying to describe someone with a PhD in cosmology. Because the schoolboy is so limited in his capacity and comprehension, he might describe this preeminent scientist by saying that, you know the books we study at school in 3rd grade, he studied all of them. Is that not an insult? Of course he studied all of them. Of course he knows all these things. Of course all of these titles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are true. The problem is when I speak them, because I don't know who I'm talking about, I have to then end by saying, Subhanaka ya la ilaha illallah. You're exalted from this. Because I don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Notice what Imam al-Sajjad says in Munajat al-Dhakirin. I want to read the actual portion. The Imam says, Ilahi, لولا الواجب من قبول أمرك. Oh Allah, had it not been obligatory for me to obey your command in speaking about you, in honoring you, in exalting you, and doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَنَزَّهْتُكَ مِنْ ذِكْرِ, I would have exalted you from my mention and my remembrance. Who am I to speak about Allah? لَنَزَّهْتُكَ مِنْ ذِكْرِ لِأَنَّهُ لَيْسَ بِقَدْرِكَ, because it's not something that has the capacity to speak about you. I don't have the capacity. It's an insult for me to even mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا عَسَىٰ أَنْ يَبْلُغَ مِقْدَارِي حَتَّى أُجْعَلَ مَحَلًّا لِحَدِيثِهِ. Who am I to be a vehicle for the exaltation and honoring of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَمِنْ أَعْظَمِ النِّعَمِ عَلَيْنَا جَرَيَانُ ذِكْرِكَ عَلَىٰ أَلْسِنَتِنَا. Oh Allah, one of your greatest blessings and gifts and honors from me is that you have allowed me to remember your name. You've allowed me to mention your exalted name. You've allowed us tonight to come together and recite dua Hamza and dua al-Jawshan and the other duas. مِنْ أَعْظَمِ نِعَمِكَ عَلَيْنَا. One of your greatest blessings is this. جَرَيَانُ ذِكْرِكَ عَلَىٰ أَلْسِنَتِنَا وَإِذْنِكَ لَنَا بِدُعَائِكَ. You have given us permission to address you, to ask of you. وَتَنْزِيهِكَ وَتَسْبِيحِكَ. إِلَهِي فَأَلْهِمْنَا ذِكْرَكَ فِي الْخَلَاءِ وَفِي الْمَلَاءِ وَاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. Oh Allah, now that you have given us this blessing to address you and to speak directly to you, then inspire us to constantly remember you. And so, back to the point I was speaking of earlier. We're trying to get near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the fact of the matter is, I look at my deeds and I see nothing but insults. I see nothing but desecrations of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have nothing to offer. Nothing. And then you look at the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Oh, we spent 4 hours on the night of Qadr, we prayed. I'm sure it's all been wiped clean. All of my sins, all of my transgressions. We did this amal and that amal. We call them a'mal. And yet look at Lady Zainab, when she places her hand beneath the body of Abu Abdullah, she says, Ilahi taqabbal hadha al-qaleel. Oh Allah, accept this little offering from Al-Muhammad. Because Zainab knows Allah. Zainab knows how majestic the creator of the universe is. And so the torn body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is a little offering in the way of Allah. You look at the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, the descriptions of their prayers and their supplications is truly mind-boggling. Ameerul Momineen would scream and cry and then fall down unconscious and become so stiff he looked like a chunk of wood. They would go back to Fatima al-Zahra. عَظَّمَ اللَّهُ لَكِ الْأَجْرِ يَا فَاطِمَةُ الزَّهْرَا. Ameerul Momineen just died. Fatima would say, no, هَذَا حَالُهُ فِي كُلِّ لَيْلَةٍ. This is how Ameerul Momineen prays to Allah every single night until he loses consciousness. Imam al-Sadiq's face would turn pale and white when he's about to wrap the ihram. They say to him, what is wrong, Ya ibn Rasulullah? He would say, I'm afraid that when I say labbaik Allahumma labbaik, Allah would say, la labbaik wa la sa'dik. No, you're not welcome. You're not answering my call. The way the Ahlul Bayt prayed and the way the Ahlul Bayt cried and the way the Ahlul Bayt pleaded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as if they were the biggest sinners, even though they had not committed a single sin. The fear Ali ibn Abi Talib had of the fires of hell was as if he was the only person who was going to be thrown in hell. As if, of course, at the same time, he had hope that if everyone ended up in the fires of hell, that he would go to paradise. That hope is something we should have. The problem, I think, is the flaw is in the fact that we don't have that fear. And if I'm going to follow in the footsteps of Ali ibn Abi Talib, then I should be truly terrified. If Ali's terrified of the fires of hell, am I more brave than Ali? Ali is afraid. He says, I wouldn't take away a grain from an ant. والله لو أعطيت الأقاليم السبع بما تحت أفلاكها على أن أعصي الله في نملة أسلبها جلب شعير ما فعلته. I wouldn't even oppress an ant in exchange for everything in the heavens. Some of us seem to be more brave than Ali ibn Abi Talib because Ali is afraid of the fires of hell, but we're not. There's something wrong here. And so, what do? We're looking for a solution. This is how desperate I am. This is how incapacitated I am. This I have to understand, which is why when we come to these majalis, you consider yourself to be the poorest of the poor. You don't think you've done anything in God's favor. Anything. Poverty has to be exhibited holistically in me. But let's say I reach that state of mind. How do we get out of this quagmire? What do we do? The answer lies in a dua. I want to read you this quick dua. Inshallah, I won't take too much of your time. But it's the night of dua and prayer. Someone sends or comes to Imam Al-Kadhim alayhi salatu wassalam, and he says to him, give me a dua, teach me a dua lish-Shahadat, for the most difficult times. Look at how the Imam teaches him to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, you'll find the key to our salvation in this dua. He says, Ilahi inna dhunubi wa kathrataha qad ghabbarat wajhi andak. Oh Allah, my sins and the sheer volume of my transgressions have made my face dirty in your eyes. وَحَجَبَتْنِي عَنْ اسْتِيهَالِ رَحْمَتِكَ. And they've prevented me from deserving your mercy. وَبَاعَدَتْنِي عَنْ اسْتِنْجَازِ مَغْفِرَتِكَ. ولولا تعلقي بآلائك وتمسكي بالرجاء لما وعدت أمثالي من المسرفين وأشباهي من الخاطئين بقولك يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. He says, Oh Allah, had it not been for the fact that you have warned us against hopelessness and despair, I would have reached hopelessness and despair. When I look at myself, I look at my actions, I look at my sins, I can forget about ever receiving your mercy. But you have told us that you should never give up. And you have said these things. وَحَذَّرْتَ الْقَانِطِينَ مِنْ رَحْمَتِكَ. And you've warned those who have despair. فَقُلْتَ وَمَنْ يَقْنَطْ مِنْ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّهِ إِلَّا الضَّالُّونَ. Only those who are truly deviant will have despair from the mercy of Allah. ثُمَّ نَدَبْتَنَا. Oh Allah, then you invited us, you called on to us. بِرَحْمَتِكَ إِلَى دُعَائِكَ. And you said, call on to me, pray to me, ask me. And you said, ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. You said that those who are too arrogant and proud to pray to me, to worship me, they will end up in the fires of hell. إلهي لقد كان ذل الإياس علي مشتملا والقنوط من رحمتك بي ملتحفا. Oh Allah, I am in complete despair. قد وعدت المحسن ظنه بك. But because you have promised the ones who have حسن الظن, who think that you are capable of giving us only that is in our interest and that is good, because you have done that, أوعدت المسيء ظنه بك عقابا اللهم وقد أسبل دمعي حسن ظني بك في عتق رقبتي من النار. Until the Imam says, Oh Allah, what gives me hope is this. وَقُلْتَ وَقَوْلُكَ الْحَقُّ لَا خُلْفَ لَهُ وَلَا تَبْدِيلٍ. You have said in your book, and your word cannot change, يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلَّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. The day of judgment is the day we will call on to every group with their leader, with their master. ذلك فإذا نفخ في الصور وبعثر ما في القبور اللهم إني أقر وأشهد وأعترف ولا أجحد وأسر وأظهر وأعلن وأبطن. Since that is the case, that I will be called on the day of judgment with my Imam, then O Allah, I confess and I acknowledge in secret and in public that what? That بأنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن محمدا عبدك ورسولك وأن عليا أمير المؤمنين وسيد الوصيين ووارث علم النبيين وقاتل المشركين وإمام المتقين ومبير المنافقين ومجاهد الناكثين والقاسطين والمارقين إمامي ومحجتي. ومن لا أثق بالأعمال وإن زكت ولا أراها منجية لي وإن صلحت إلا بولايته. Not only is he my Imam and my master and my beloved leader, but I also know that I cannot trust my actions and my deeds except if I have his wilayah in my heart, except if I follow him. وَالْإِقْرَارِ بِفَضَائِلِهِ, and I acknowledge all of his virtues. وَالْقَبُولِ مِنْ حَمَلَتِهَا وَالتَّسْلِيمِ لِرُوَاتِهَا, I accept those who transmit his virtues and his merits. وَالْإِقْرَارِ بِفَضَائِلِهِ اللهم وأقر بأوصيائه من أبنائه أئمة وحججا. Oh Allah, if you're going to reject all of my deeds, then you can't reject the fact that I love Ali ibn Abi Talib. That is true, and you know it to be true. And I follow his hujaj, his children, وأدلة وسرجا وأعلاما ومنارا وسادة وأبرارا وأدين بسرهم وجهرهم. They represent my way to Allah. My religion is embodied by them, and I believe in them. Then the Imam says, and I'm skipping through some of the lines here, he says, Allahumma fad'uni yawma hashri wa hina nashri bi imamati. Oh Allah, on the day of judgment, when you call on to me, have me as one of the people who flock towards them. Let them be my imams and my leaders. وَاجْعَلْنِي مِنْ إِخْوَانِهِمْ وَأَنْقِذْنِي بِهِمْ. Save me through them. يَا مَوْلَاي مِنْ حَرِّ النِّيرَانِ فَإِنَّكَ إِنْ أَعْفَيْتَنِي مِنْهَا كُنْتُ مِنَ الْفَائِزِينَ. The Imam then goes on to do tawassul. توسلت بهم إليك من آل رسولك صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى أمير المؤمنين وعلى سيدتي فاطمة الزهراء والحسن والحسين والأئمة من ولدهم والحجة المستورة من ذريتهم. And the hidden hujjah, the hidden proof of Allah who is from their lineage. I believe in them and I ask for their intercession and in their wasila. The Imam then continues to stress on this point, that even though I have nothing to show, one thing I do have is the love. Maybe not the allegiance, maybe I am not a Shia, but I am a muhib of the Ahlul Bayt. I'm a muhib of the Imam of the time. Maybe the love that I have towards the Imam of the time will be reflected back from the Imam towards me. Someone wrote a letter to Imam al-Jawad, and the Imam wrote back to him. There's an entire book that was recently published called Makatibul A'imma. Beautiful collection, all of the letters of the Ahlul Bayt to various people. So the Imam writes back to this person. He says to him, Ya Fulan, you have asked me to pray for you, but when did I ever stop praying for you? The Imam then said to him that I love you and I always think about you. You've asked me for permission to use a portion of the huquq, wujuhat, khums. I grant you all of them, and you can do whatever you wish with them. Then the Imam says to him, I love you and I pray that Allah raises you with us on the Day of Judgment. May you be raised with us. I constantly think about you. Imagine if the Imam of the time said this on a night like this. Do I deserve it? Absolutely not. But is he such a noble master that even when his insubordinate, sinful, criminal slave turns to him with a little sincerity and calls on his name and asks him to intercede for him, the Imam is too good to turn his face away. A man by the name of al-Shaqrani lived in the time of Imam al-Kadhim. The hadith says that one day the Khalifa had given some money and distributed money to the people. Al-Shaqrani also wanted a little bit of this money, but no one knew him. He was a Shia, meaning somehow he had the love of the Ahlul Bayt, he had the love of the Imam of his time in his heart, even though he was sinful, truly sinful. He committed a grave sin, a kabira, which was that he drank alcohol. So, the hadith says that as he was walking, he came across Imam al-Kadhim. The Imam came up to him. The Imam whispered something in his ear. He took the money, he gave it to him. He poured it from his sleeve into his sleeve. Then the Imam said to him, Ya Shaqrani, Inna al-hasana min kulli ahadin hasan. When someone carries out a good deed, no matter who does it, a good deed is a good deed. If it's the worst of the worst, a good deed is still good. Maybe the person who does it is bad. وَمِنْكَ أَحْسَنُ. But from you it's even better. لِمَكَانِكَ مِنَّا. Because of your position with regards to us. Because of your connection to us. Because after all, people know you as a Shia. And so, if you do something good, it's even better. وَإِنَّ الْقَبِيحَ مِنْ كُلِّ أَحَدٍ قَبِيحٌ وَمِنْكَ أَقْبَحٌ. When someone does something evil, it doesn't matter who does it, evil is evil. But when you do it, it's even worse. لِمَكَانِكَ مِنَّا. Because people will say, that Shia did such and such. Did you hear what he did? Or what this community did? Or how this group of the followers and lovers of the Ahlul Bayt got into a fight amongst themselves? And they had to go and appeal to the court system. Did you hear what happened? What a shame. What a shame. لِمَكَانِكَ مِنَّا. The evil that you commit is way worse. Now, our excuse to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He says to us, why were you like this? Is number one, إلهي وسيدي ومولاي بعلي بفاطمة بالحسن بالحسين. Overlook what I've done. Forgive me. And number two, our excuse is this, and they've taught us to say this. They have said that when the holy month of Ramadan begins, recite Dua al-Iftitah. And in the latter portion of Dua al-Iftitah, what do we say? We say, Ilahi inna nashku ilayka faqda nabiyyin. Who said this? The first person to say it was Ameerul Momineen. Before the battle of Jamal began, Ameerul Momineen got up and he said, Allahumma inna nashku ilayka faqda nabiyyin. In other words, oh Allah, if our Imam was with us, maybe I would have been a better person. If I could see the Imam pray, if I could see the Imam perform dua, if I could see the Imam go to Hajj, if I could see the Imam in front of me, I might have been a better person. ولكن إلهنا إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا وغيبة ولينا وقلة عددنا وكثرة عدونا وتظاهر الزمان علينا. It's an excuse. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it from us. Maybe He will accept it. My apologies for taking so much of your time. I wish to take you to Kufa now. It's a very difficult night when the Muslim Ummah became yateen. أنا وعلي أبوا هذه الأمة. And so when Ameerul Momineen departed from this world, we all became orphans. I don't know if I can address the Imam of the time like this. I do apologize. Ya Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, forgive me. But remember what Ameerul Momineen said in his wasiyah, Allah, Allah fil Aytam. He said, I ask you in the name of Allah to look after the orphans. Ya Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, nahnu Aytam. We are your orphans. Look after us tonight. Pray for us. Ask Allah to forgive us. Such a difficult night. Ameerul Momineen. One of the recommended acts on the night of the 19th was what? Allahumma al'an qatalata Ameerul Momineen. Why? Because Ibn Muljam was only the puppet marionette. The strings were held by other people. Al-Baladhiri, who was a Sunni historian, he has a book called Ansabul Ashraf. In that book he mentions Ibn Muljam. He says that Umar ibn al-Khattab in his time as a Khalifa wrote to Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As was very special to the Khulafa. He was often the person they would appoint to carry out the most critical tasks. Even in Shura Sitta, the committee of the six that were formed by Umar, Amr ibn al-As was tasked to supervise this committee and ensure that no one gets elected other than Uthman. And so Umar writes to Amr ibn al-As. The address is Ansab al-Ashraf lil-Baladhiri. He says to him, Ya Amr ibn al-As, اتخذ دارا لعبد الرحمن ibn Muljam al-Muradi. I wish for you to buy a house as a gift and give it to Abd al-Rahman ibn Muljam. وَقَرِّبْهُ إِلَى الْمَسْجِدِ. And make sure the house is close to the masjid. وَوَسَّعْ عَلَيْهِ دَارًا. And make sure it's a big house, make him comfortable. The killers of Ameerul Momineen, it wasn't just Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam and Qutam and people like that, or Muawiyah. It was a concerted, orchestrated effort that had been set into motion years before Ali ibn Abi Talib was struck on the head in the mihrab of Masjid al-Kufa. And so, imagine how difficult it must have been for Ali ibn Abi Talib in these last few days. The hadith says that Ameerul Momineen was on his deathbed. He was surrounded by members of his family, some companions, when suddenly the Imam looked up and said, Marhaban, marhaban, welcome, welcome. He said to him, Ya Ameerul Momineen, who are you saying that to? He said, Innaha Fatima. Fatima al-Zahra veiled her face before she died so that Ali wouldn't see the marks on her face. Now finally I get to see my beloved Fatima. I get to see Rasulullah. Marhaban biki ya bint Muhammad. Fatima, imagine Ameerul Momineen having this conversation. Oh Fatima, it was so hard every time I went into the alleyway where you were slapped. It was so difficult every time I confronted al-Mughira ibn s.a.w.a. One day Ameerul Momineen is sitting with some of his companions. The Muslims had become angry with the way Umar was running the government. He was acting with favoritism, helping his friends and distancing others. And so Muslims became agitated. In order to quell this dissent, Umar ibn al-Khattab said all of his governors have to present all of their wealth and say how much money they have and how much money they've raised, so that it would all be transparent. But he gave certain exceptions. Some of his governors were exempt from providing their income to the Khalifa. And so someone says that I went to Ameerul Momineen, he was sitting in the masjid, surrounded by Al-Miqdad, by Salman, by Ammar, by some of his companions. He went and he said to the Imam, Ya Ameerul Momineen, did you hear what Umar did? He said that all the governors have to transparently show their income, but he gave exceptions to some of those governors, and one of them was Al-Qunfuz. The Imam then looked to the right and the left. In other words, Ali ibn Abi Talib has to be careful what he says. He looked to the right and the left, and then he said, do you know why he exempted him? شَكَرَ لَهُ ضَرْبَتَهُ بِالسَّوْمِ فَاطِمَةً. He wants to show appreciation and thank him for when he beat Fatima with his whip, had left a mark on the arm of Fatima. That's why he gave him. That's why he exempted him. Now imagine, Ya Mu'mineen, Ameerul Momineen after this whole time is about to meet his beloved wife Fatima once again. So the Imam is on the one hand delighted, the Imam is happy. He said to one of his companions, Inna al-Jannah, I'm going to paradise to meet Rasulullah and Fatima and Ja'far and my family members and Hamza. But on the other hand, Ameerul Momineen, when he saw his son Imam al-Hussein crying more than others, the Imam also cried. Ameerul Momineen looked at Abu Abdullah. He said to him, Ya qurrata ayni wa thamarata fuadi, O light of my eye, Ya Hussein, O fruit of my heart, كأني أنظر إليك وأنت تذبح ذبحا عن قريب. Don't cry, O Abu Abdullah. I can almost see the dagger on your throat. Allahu Akbar. Ameerul Momineen cried. Imam al-Hussein cried. They embraced. Then Ameerul Momineen looked at Zainab. He said, Bunayya Zainab. This was in Kufa, remember. The Imam said, كَأَنِّي بِكِ وَنِسَاءِ قَوْمِكِ. As for you, I can almost see the day when you and other women in your family, سَبَايَا فِي هَذِهِ الْأَرْضِ, you will be paraded like slaves in these same streets and alleyways. Allahu Akbar. Let us go to Karbala. Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Zainab is the one who narrates the story. His boy Ali al-Akbar came and asked him for permission to leave. She says that with every step that Ali al-Akbar took away from his father, I could see the Imam trembling and shaking. After a while he heard the cry, Aba alayka minni salam. Father, unlike every other companion who said, Adrikni, come and save me, Ali al-Akbar didn't want to torture Abu Abdullah. He said, Father, salam be upon you. Hada jaddi Rasulullah. Qad saqani bikasih al-anfar. Alladhi la adba'u ba'dahu abada. Which means, oh Father, remember when I told you I was thirsty? Don't worry about me anymore. Rasulullah just quenched my thirst. وَإِنَّهُ يَقُولَ أَنَّ لَكَ كَأْسًا مَدْخُورًا. He says we have a cup waiting for you as well. Abu Abdullah rushed to his son. فَرَمَى بِنَفْسِهِ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. The Imam didn't disembark or alight from the horse. He threw himself on the. They heard the Imam scream, Bunayya Ali! Bunayya Ali! Waladi Ali! Ala dunya ba'daka al-ardh.
Ashhadu anna Aliya waliyullah. أشهد أن حجة
المظلوم خاطر حیدر حیدر خاطر افتادی در بستر زهرآباد افتادی در بستر زهرآباد چشمات از اشک شده دریا بابا